Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Mark Anthony's Music Picks. Today is episode 130. For today's episode, I'm going to be revisiting a series that I had started a couple years back, which was the Detroit House Classics series, which features some of Detroit's mainstay artists. Now, I'm not sure if Detroit really has flash-in-the-pan electronic artists. It probably does. But the premise for these episodes is to pay homage to the OGs, the real Detroit artists that generated their own sound in the 90s and 2000s and stuck with it and are not subject to the whims of whatever is popular in the electronic music world. That's one of the things I love about the Detroit artists is their ability to pick a sound, stick with it, and put their own stylistic touch on classic, timeless beats. Being that this is the third part in the Detroit House Classics series, I'm starting to run a little bit thin of artists, as you can imagine, but I did manage to dig up 5 artists that I haven't talked about yet to this point. And if I sound a little bit nasally for this episode, it's because I'm getting over being sick this past week, so just bear with me here. My first artist that I want to feature for you is one that really came out of the gate swinging in 2012. Not somebody that's new or was new in 2012, but launched a label called La Vida in 2012. You can see this is the La Vida 001 release, and this is by Andres. Andres was one of Kenny Dixon Jr.'s, I guess, cohorts. He was featured on a lot of the very early raw KDJ and Mahogany Music releases. And KDJ and Mahogany Music I think started in maybe around 2002-ish, and the labels and the artwork and the sound for some of those records was really raw, but those are also some really super sought after records for true house heads, people that really love house and like to delve into hip hop and soul and funk and anything in between. KDJ and Mahogany Music has a lot of real old school cult fans and followers. Andres in 2012 almost resurrected his career, or somehow just totally absolutely blew up with La Vida 01, and the track that took everybody by storm was New For You. The first time that I heard this, I absolutely lost my mind because I've talked about before, I always love tracks with violins, and this record here actually features a violin sample from, gosh, I can't remember the artist's name. I'm going to put the cover up here for you. The album name was Voyager. It was from 1978, and the track was called Time Is the Teacher. And if you listen to the first minute of that track, you can go and check it out on Discogs, you'll hear the signature violins that are in here. Now, Andres did not use a straight up sample. It's not like a straight up lift. It's like he grabbed this little bit of violin and this little bit and sort of stitched them together. So it's sampling, but very clever sampling in a way that took a slow original track, compressed, not compressed it, but changed the timing of how the strings hit and then made it palatable for a 120-ish, 120 to 125 house jam, which this is. This record has sold, oh my gosh, there's 7,000 owners for this on Discogs. 7,000 owners for a house track that came out in 2012, which is nuts. I mean, you got to figure that's at least 7-8 represses that they just keep doing, and it just keeps selling because it's just such an absolute classic. And I said in the beginning of this episode that I'm starting to pull a little bit deeper from the Detroit catalog with my artist selections. And this guy might be the ultimate Detroit sleeper. I didn't even really, I was really trying hard to find Detroit artists that were really respected and had a tight, undisputable sound. And I came across Gari Romalis. I bought this record. This is a 2017 release. I think I bought it in 2018. It's on a somewhat quiet label called Sud Wax or Sud Beat. It's one of those two. And as you can see, just looking at the label, it's relatively unassuming. This is something that you could, it's really slick in the way that the colors are arranged, but it's something that wouldn't necessarily get your attention in the store. And that's kind of like what I love about it. I love that Detroit artists have the ability to just put out a quiet looking record that has really tight beats on it. And I know that I have a dub techno following that subscribes to my channel. I think probably 1/3 of my subscribers are dub techno fans, which is great. And if you guys like those dub techno crossovers where this is not dub techno by any means, but if you listen to some of the elements that appear on both sides of this EP, which is absolutely fantastic, you'll get your little dub techno fix if you listen to this. I had a hard time choosing or deciding which track to use, but I went with the A1. It's called Abstract's Linear Mix. It's relatively minimal, but I love the signature heavy Detroit kick drum in it and just the nice soft undertones. I think this would really lend itself to an after hours set, a really chill vibe where you needed to keep the momentum going, but also you didn't want to overwhelm your listeners. This has a level of sophistication to it that I think Detroit brings that a lot of other artists missed. It's sophisticated in its minimalism, and it has just enough elements to keep the momentum going. And before I move on from Gari Romalis, I just want to say that he reminds me very much of Delano Smith with his catalog. If I went back and listened through probably 10 of his EPs, and I added a bunch of them to my wants list. This guy, he's a total Detroit sleeper. And if you like that sample that I just gave you there, check out some of his other more recent releases in, let's say, the last 5 years. Just start there. You'll hear a lot of the similarities, like where a Delano Smith record sort of has a signature sound. Gari also has a signature sound as well, and I think he really brings class. So check him out. Give him a nod. I think he deserves a little bit more attention than he's getting. And moving on to my next artist. This is Kris Wadsworth. Kris Wadsworth is actually a Detroit producer. And I was like, man, how am I going to describe Kris's sound? I've been following Kris for probably the last 10 years. He broke out initially with this single on Get Physical. You guys remember Get Physical? Get Physical was like the poster boy for tacky minimal from maybe 2007 to 2012. And to be honest with you, I thought the label had gone defunct, but it's not. Get Physical is still releasing, and they're still actually putting out vinyl, and I think probably digital too. Minimal has obviously gone away. When I say minimal, I don't mean true minimal. I mean like the cliched minimal has obviously gone the way of the dodo bird. But Get Physical is still around, and it's odd to see that Kris Wadsworth even made an appearance there at all, because he doesn't really fit the Get Physical vibe. But This is a great record, and I'm glad it got pressed on Get Physical because they knew how to get vinyl cut and have it, come out properly, legit. His track "It's Time" is very Detroity. If you listen to some of the elements in here, you'll hear Kris using old Detroit drum machines, like the little ping 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 sound. I don't know if that's an 80 from an 808, a 909. It's in one of the classic sound banks. I think Kris did the vocal himself. It's a classic pitch down vocal. And if you listen to the arrangement of the song, this is not a typical track. This has a very complex breakdown. Kris did the voiceover, I'm pretty sure that's Kris, because I didn't see anybody else featured in the credits. And if you just listen to the way that the build-up plays and the drop hits, it's just something that was really out of this world and still is to this day. Kris Wadsworth, if I had to put a label on his sound, I would say he's almost like a hard house guy that started making more not chilled out, but he like toned down hard house and brought it into Detroit. That's what it sounds like to me. And the reason I say that is the elements are of the 2000 era hard house, and he tends to focus a lot on his kick drums. His kick drums are really big, they're really heavy and dominant. Every Detroit producer has a signature kick drum. Delano Smith has his, Mike Huckabee had his, Keith Worthy has his kick drum, and Kris has his own type of kick drum too. It has that little bit of hard house distortion in it. It just kind of gives it that Kris Wadsworth signature sound where you can tell that it's definitely him.
You know what time it is. I know what time it is. Check your shit before you wreck your shit. Oh yeah, that Detroit shit. You know what time it is.
And moving on to my fourth pick today, this artist is someone that I have to admit I'm super ignorant on. I think I have 2 Rick Wade records in my entire collection, but I did want to feature this one because this is something that's been on my shelf. I have a shelf of records that I would play theoretically if I were ever asked to play a gig out. I mean, that's becoming less and less possible. Probably the odds are approaching 0 that I'll ever be playing vinyl out again, but if I ever did, I have a shelf full of records that I would just grab and take them all with me. And this is one of them here. So this record has made the cut into what I would potentially play out because I love the simplicity of it. Like I said, these Detroit guys, they know how to make it just complex enough that everything works, but not too complicated, not too busy. This is Rick's attempt on Sudwax, the same label that the Gari Romalis record is on. This is a low-key label. Not a lot of people want these records. The prices are $4, $5, $6. So if you can find a copy, just go ham because you're going to get your money's worth here. This release is called the Detroit EP. And my choice here is the track called Manish on the A1. I love the moodiness of it. I can hear this low riding synths in the background as I'm sitting here imagining it right now. And there's an element in it where the bass line, it's almost like it has a rapid fire gate applied to it. and you can hear it's like the kick or the bass is like stuttering, like a very like rapid fire stutter that just gives it this like, oh, that's a little catchy there. I never heard somebody stutter a kick or a bass like that. It's just something really spectacular. And I've listened to some other Rick Wade records. He doesn't have as much of a confined sound as some of the other artists that I talked about, like, for example, Delano Smith. Rick Wade will go off into much more housey directions, and on a Rick Wade EP, you really never know what you're going to get. But this one here is one that would fit in with a Keith Worthy set or a Delano Smith set because it just has that heavy Detroit punch to it. And I mentioned Keith Worthy a few times in this episode. I never talked about that man on this channel, so I'm going to talk about him now. Keith Worthy released his album on Aesthetic Audio in 2014. That's a quiet sleeper hit. Anybody that owns that loves it. And if you look at his catalog, I think he's got 6 or 7 EPs that he's done, and he's also been featured on some of those other East Coast house labels. I can't, the ones that have like Fred P and DJ Q on them. He sometimes mixes in with that gang. But here, he did a really strong release on Aesthetic Audio. This is the Moments in Rhythm Volume 1. And with Keith having such a small catalog, you can pretty much buy anything that's got his name on it, and you know that you're going to get a winner. He is very tight with his quality control, and honestly, I'm not sure if he's even producing anymore. I think the last thing that he did was his album in 2014. So he had a window from about 2007 to 2014 where he was doing releases at a steady but not too rapid pace, and maybe he retired, maybe he stopped. I hope he's doing well because I really appreciate his music. Here he did the track Lost in Sound. There's 2 other winners on here. Like I said, almost every Keith Worthy track is worthy of your attention. But here, Lost in Sound took the cake for me. I love the absolute depth to the kick drum. I get entranced by the kick drum in this track, the same way that Mike Huckabee's Versatility EP will just capture you with that kick drum and hypnotize you and send you into a frenzied state. I get the same feeling here with Lost in Sound, and it's just it's almost like the midsection of the track isn't even really there. It's just all down low and some highs sprinkled on top, and that is just Detroit magic to me. That's all for today's episode. Let me know down in the comments if any of these tracks are ones that are your favorites as well. Let me know if it reminds you of any other tracks that you think I would like. Thank you to Rick Wade, Gari, Romalis, Keith Worthy, Kris Wadsworth, and Andres. Thank you for all of the musical contributions. We love you guys, and please keep the output coming. Take care.
Swing a sweet lullaby. The sunlight garden glowed with blossoms, moontides of the sea, enfolding your sweet arms, glide with open arms, sailing my dreamboat creation soul, blessings heavenly. We're spinning in a pyramid of light as day turns to night. We're spinning in a pyramid of light as day turns to night. We're spinning in a pyramid.